So this is the Smith Locke 6-pin Euro as sold by Screwfix in the UK. It has narrow pin spacing. It has security pins in there in the form of spools. I'm going to use this 50 thousandths Z wrench. I'm going to put it in the bottom of the keyway there, and I'm going to just get my rake and I'm going to see if we can rake this into a full set. There we go. So we're now in quite a deep full set, so we know that we're on the spool pins. And the thing about this, the spool pins in this lock, is they're very deep. So when you start picking onto the spool pins, then you have to manually feed the counter rotation in. So I'm feeding that in. There we go. So I've just set pin 5, and we still got the full set because there's 2 sets of spools, and the second spool is going to be on pin 2. Just pop the pick on pin 2, and then we're going to again have to counter rotate manually when we're on that spool pin. It's a very slippery pin, this one. There we go. And then we get the open on the lock. So it's a bit of a tricky one because you've got to work out where the spool pins are. But as you can see, once you've worked that out, it's just a case of picking out of spools as usual. Right, I finished the gutting of the Smith Locke 6-pin Euro. Right at the very front of the core, sitting here and here, are these 2 anti-drill pins, making a drilling attack from the front of the core difficult. And then we have 6 standard key pins, and then sitting underneath them, the driver pins, we have 3 steel driver pins, which are all anti-drill measures, and we've got 3 of these really deep spool pins that cause a lot of problems when you're picking this lock. And then along the bottom are all standard springs. If we look at the actual core itself, all of the pin chambers are fairly normal. There's no milling or special anti-pick measures on the top of those pin chambers. But, and this is the interesting part, if you look down from this side, you can see that we have, let's see if we can get, there we go. You can see that we have a drilling. So you can see the first 4 holes, and you can see the 5th, the 6th. And the 5th one, as you can see, they've left a shelf in there, which means that when you're picking and you're running your pick along there, when it gets to that point, it's not actually picking the pin. So I would imagine if you put a pick gun in here with a needle, it's going to be hitting this metal shelf that you can see here, rather than influencing the pins. And also when you're picking, if you're not careful and your pick sits on that shelf, then you're also not going to be able to lift that key pin. So obviously the key, the side of the key is going to reach. If I just turn it there, you can see that it's just starting to thin out. The key will obviously be able to influence the key pin at that point because of the angle and where it's positioned. But other forms of picking will obviously not work. And then if we look at the lock body itself, the cylinder, you can see that the front of the Bible here is protected by a single anti-drill pin there, and then you have the 6 narrow pin chambers, and then inside they're all pretty much standard drillings, and there isn't any anti-pick measures going on at that particular point there. If I put a 6-pin spacing, what you could effectively say standard 6-pin spacing next door to it, you can see the narrow pin means that they get 6 pins in the same space as you would do 5 pins on a standard spacing lock. So the narrow spacing means that you can fit all of those 6 pins in the same space as you can on 5 on other locks. This means that when you drop down to the smaller sizes of these Euros, like a 30 millimeter Euro or 35, it means that they can still use 6 pins, whereas other locks with this type of spacing will drop down to just 5 pins. So this will always have 6 pins in it, no matter what size the lock is. So this is the core from the Smith Locke Euro, and what I've done is I've put the key pins into the pin chambers, and then I've rested the driver pins on top, and effectively this is what the lock would look like in its neutral position without a key in there, because normally there would be spring pressure on top of these to keep them in place. But what this is illustrating is these are very, very tall spool pins, and when you're picking the lock and it goes into a full set, you can see, because the side of the spool pins are cut out, there is a huge amount of movement. It allows a lot of rotation, and it effectively traps those spool pins, meaning that when you try and push them up, you don't always necessarily get the counter rotation that you're expecting. So I'm surprised there are 3 spool pins in here, because I actually only felt 2 when I was picking it. But they were very effective. They gave us a nice deep full set, and then we had to manually counter rotate these so they started to fall into position. Otherwise we wouldn't have had a clue that they were in there. So in summary, this Smith & Locke budget Euro cylinder is actually packing quite a punch of anti-drill. It has certainly has anti-pick security spool pins. It has that little ledge to thwart some of the picking methods that might be used. So certainly anti-drill, certainly anti-pick. There is no sacrificial cut on the cylinder, so it's obviously still vulnerable to being snapped. And the only other thing to note on this is the manufacturing tolerances are really quite poor. If you look at the amount of slop there is inside this cylinder, the core inside the cylinder there, that's been manufactured with pretty poor tolerances. And actually, when you pick these, that actually makes this lock even harder, because the poor tolerances will influence the way that the pins are set, and they may not be as predictable as a lock that's made of a much higher quality. Okay, that's that then. Hope you've enjoyed this pick and gut. Bye for now.